Oh, hello. You caught me reading. Um, welcome to the AI Literacy live briefing from Brilliant Noise. I'm Antony Mayfield. I'm the CEO of Brilliant Noise, if you don't know me. This briefing is to launch our new paper on AI literacy, which is the result of the work we've been doing really over the last year and a half. I think a year ago in October and November, we ran three lecture webinars which were kind of sounding the alarm about AI and the urgent need for organizations to look at it, to look at the ability for their people to understand it, and explore the potential for organizations. A year on, we've learned a hell of a lot, and we've learned that both as a living lab, everybody here at Brilliant Noise uses AI in their everyday work, and working with some incredible clients as well, right from the start of the year, and more joining as we've gone along on developing AI literacy in their organizations, taking it from a kind of those moments of wow and inspiration when you first get to use the tools well, into more structured processes where they're beginning to realize the value, explore what it means for them. So thank you all for attending today. As attendees, you'll get an early copy of Prepared Minds, the paper that we're putting out, and then it's going to be going out to everybody else a couple of days later. So let's get started. First of all, the name of the paper, Prepared Minds, comes from this quote from Louis Pasteur, as Wikipedia describes him, microbiologist, but as everybody else knows him, the bloke who invented pasteurized milk. Amazing scientist, Louis Pasteur, and sometimes this quote is interpreted as chance favours the prepared mind, or luck favours the prepared mind. But it's about two things that are really relevant to us now. It's not just a kind of be lucky or turn up like prepared and ready to discover things, although that's very important. Pasteur was a scientist, and he had a framework waiting for when those discoveries were made, to process it, to check it, to understand what it actually was, and to exploit the possibilities of the technologies or the discoveries that he made. That's where we need to be, so hence Prepared Minds. And everyone in the team in Brilliant Noise over this last year has gone on their own AI literacy journey, and have ended up in very different places, actually, honing different skills from creative and copywriting to data analysis to even software production, which was a surprise to everyone, as we don't have anyone on the team who is a software engineer, but more of that later. The reason that a year on we're still saying that this is an urgent situation for companies to explore and to discover what's possible with AI, as we'll say a couple of times, it's a process of discovery more than it's a process of design, and it's a process of discovery rather than of procurement, of going out and buying solutions. We're seeing a year on, a lot of the large tech companies are offering AI products, some of them very good, some of them very patchy for the money. And a lot of our existing software providers, a lot of SaaS companies, are talking about the dangers of AI and of DIY AI, and trying to kind of put uncertainty out there. But the reason that research and learning and literacy for all of us in business is so important is that we've got two kind of increasing things with increasing velocity that form a vector of possibility. We've got the technology, which is increasing still at a very, very fast rate. It is predicted to go on for another 2-3 years at least with generative AI. The processing power, the amount of money that's going into that processing power to build the models, the software that runs what we call AI, generative AI. I should stress I'm talking about generative AI throughout the whole of this presentation, and I'm presuming that I'm talking to a mainly non-technical audience. We're not going into machine learning or any of the details. This is AI for the rest of us, I suppose, or for all of us. But the technology is advancing at an incredible pace. I think at the HubSpot conference last week, one of their leaders, one of their founders, said that it was moving faster on most measures than Moore's law, which was the law that since the 1970s, the price of CPUs that run computers had halved every 18 months, and that had created a long tech revolution over a few decades. This is moving much quicker just in terms of that technology. But at the same time, if the technology stopped today, if we got no more models after today, which is highly unlikely, we would still have 5 to 10 years of innovation and business innovation that would be happening. We would still be inventing the things that really revolutionize the business landscape, even if everything stopped right now. So we haven't seen those businesses yet, we haven't seen the technology mature yet, but unlike every other technology that's come along, it's available to everyone in the world with an internet connection. And that's where the discovery part of this vector comes in, because we're finding uses for it and people are finding uses. What's being sold to us in terms of the access to the models like ChatGPT is really just access to the energy, access to a tool-making tool that we can do with whatever we want. So what we're going to be going through in this briefing, we're going to take about the rest of the first half hour with me talking, and then we're going to move on to onto Q&A. Keeping that really simple in this format. We're on YouTube. You can leave comments under the video. They'll be picked up here. We'll answer as many as we can. Any we can't get to, we'll send out answers to later when we send you the papers. I've kind of given you a welcome and a purpose, a bit of context, and really what we're going to do now is go through a few key points from the paper that will hopefully be useful to you in your organisation if you're looking to really take AI, generative AI and AI tools seriously in your leadership team, in your innovation teams, wherever you are. So first of all, what we're going to do is take a look at this concept of AI literacy. It sounds quite dry, it sounds quite academic, but it's vitally important that we understand that what it is, and that it is actually challenging to acquire it. You know, I mean, we've all acquired literacies in our life. The first one we acquire is the ability to read words and to read and write text. It's very difficult at first. It's exciting once we're through that barrier, and then we never really stop learning through our lives. Another comparison we'll make is to language and to learning a foreign language. It's very much like that as well. And these are non-technical metaphors intentionally, but they really tie up closely with the experience of learning to speak AI, really. And you need people in your teams, and especially in your leadership teams, to be developing their AI literacy so that they're able to understand and explore themselves, but also so that they can make better decisions about how they're going to invest in it in the future as their industry changes, as your industry, your customers, your organisation inevitably changes. So here's our definition that we're working with at the moment. There are a few around. This reflects quite a few of them. If you want to get super academic, Nature, the scientific journal, has published a very in-depth look at AI literacy amongst scientists and how that's developing. But this is one, as I say, for most of us. So AI literacy, I'm going to read it out, which is not my favourite thing to do, reading words on a slide, but it's important. And then I'm just going to go through each of these highlighted points. I'm going to leave it on screen and talk about what they mean. So AI literacy is an evolving set of skills. It includes critical thinking, knowing the limitations of AI systems and the ability to assess their outputs, and understanding where they can complement or enhance human cognition, and expertise in a specific given field. It's the ability to understand and evaluate artificial intelligence systems and tools in a responsible, ethical, and effective way. Now, obviously, all of those elements is a very finely worded statement, but all of those elements are really important. First of all, evolving. The skills that are involved in using AI are changing very rapidly. They start off more or less the same, and then they evolve in lots of different directions. Pretty soon, I think anyone who's an expert in working with generative AI is going to start to specialize into certain areas of it, probably, usually to do with the field that they are already in. We've put critical thinking up there, right up front. Nothing should be taken for granted in this field. One of our mantras is nobody knows anything, which we nicked from William Goldman, talking about Hollywood. Nobody knows anything about AI. The people who've created these large language models, as they're called, the giant models of data that we interact with through things like ChatGPT, they're not quite sure why it works or how it works exactly. They just know that the more data they put in and the more computing power they put in, the better these models seem to get. So critical thinking is really important, both about the results that you're getting, but also about how other people are talking about AI. One of the things we often say when we're talking and teaching AI techniques to clients or even ourselves is people say, how do you do this, or what works here? And what we have to say is, well, we should say this works if you're prompting an AI, this works if you're trying to build a bot to do a certain task and automate something. But what we always really mean is, this is what seems to work for now. This seems to be the way that it works. So critical thinking, absolutely crucial. Knowing the limits to enhance limits of AI is really, really important as well, because when you're dealing with these systems, knowing that they aren't very good at maths, that they hallucinate, knowing that sometimes they need information structured in a certain way in order to work well. So knowing where their limits are, and also knowing your own limits as a human, is really, really useful. Because these aren't magic thinking machines that can do things for us. They're amazing thinking systems that we can engage with and think with that supercharge human intelligence, really. And the expertise in a given field, like this, is where your business is going to make is going to make serious headway if it engages with AI properly. The knowledge that you have about how your world works and the data that you have about how your industry or your clients work, that's the stuff that you're going to be able to make more valuable. So how a lawyer uses ChatGPT is different to how a marketer uses ChatGPT, and neither of the ways that they use it will be exactly the same as anyone else. It's your innovation, your thought processes. You know, we're used to standard issue software. This is one of the big things that gets in our way. We're used to standard issue software that does something for everyone, and actually we're talking about very, very personalized content, very, very personalized software and tools that we're building for ourselves. It's a tool-making tool. And then lastly, responsible. Really, we're often talking about, security and being responsible with data and being responsible with how we use them. It's very important to be clear on that at all times. Security is often a big, privacy is often a big blocker for companies. It's the kind of bugbear that we put up to stop ourselves really engaging with the subject. But it's quite easy to overcome if you look at what's being shared where and policies to make sure that customer data is secure, that commercially sensitive data is secure. Ethical, that's kind of up to you. Ethics is an individual or an organizational matter. In our workshops, very, very useful conversations are had when we look at the company's values and try and apply them to AI. And of course, effective. We've got to find the ROI in here. We've got to find the way that it's effective. So we dwelt there just a little while with AI literacy, but I think that definition is super important. I'm going to pull out a couple of things more from that as well. This diagram, a colourful diagram we've got up the top, is really, again, underlining that AI is as good as your brain is at engaging with it. So you need to learn the skill of working with AI, but that doesn't make that will give you advantages. It will help you with skills that maybe you're not so great at. It will make the things you're really good at amazingly good, but you kind of got to work out your own processes and workflows with that. It brings up a lot of things. There are a few phrases here that we get into a lot in the paper and with our clients. Once you start working with AI, it naturally encourages you to see systems, to see the systems of companies and see the systems of working with it. It's usually that you fix something simple and then you realise that in order to do more with it or to be able to share it with colleagues, you actually need to fix something over here. And to fix something over here, like a data format or a way of working, there's something over here as well. So you start to see things in systems quite quickly, and that's interesting. This very jargony phrase, but I think very useful one, is metacognition. This is a word from neuroscience psychology, but it's the ability to think about thinking. And this comes in more and more as you work with AI and you become more advanced, is that if you can understand how you think about things, then you can work more effectively with the machine because you're kind of spotting the weak spots, spotting where it can speed you up. As with all things, I think a growth mindset, a learning mindset is really, really important here. Let's just touch on some of those limits of the brain. Brains, know your limits. Big fans of the brain here at Brilliant Noise. Yeah, amazing. That wasn't in the script. The thing about brains is the more that you understand about them, the better you can work anyway. And this is doubly so with AI. But it's some of the basics that have come through in neuroscience in the recent years. The things from thinking fast and slow, from lots of other popular works of neuroscience. And we've spent a fair bit of time talking to neuroscientists as well. One of the things about the brain is you only have 3 working memory slots, maybe 5, but 3 is probably more likely. That means you can only remember 3 chunks of data at a time. Any more than that, you become overloaded, which is why you need lists or to write things down or an abacus. Those are all mind-extending technologies. But you've only got 3 to 5 slots. It's quite easy once you get overwhelmed to become quite stressed, and once you become stressed, you can't think clearly. So that's a fairly fundamental limit on human thinking that we ignore all of the time. We also ignore lots of our other limits on our intelligence because we have things like diaries and clocks that make us do a little bit too much. But you may know we can only focus on 90 minutes maximum. Anyone been in a 2-hour meeting lately? It broke everyone in it. Nobody can focus for that long. 4 hours a day of high quality work, of high quality heavy lifting cognitive work is possible. Blind spots. We've got lots of cognitive biases. We've got little things that we just don't notice that we think we know. All sorts of things like that. The more you know about how the brain works, and unique features I've just put in because there is no such thing as a typical human brain. We all have very different brains. It's something we're becoming more and more aware of with neurodiversity, and talked about neurodivergence. But dyslexia means that you think differently. Dyspraxia, which is one of my superpowers, as I knock over things all of the time. Depression. All of these features, or sometimes we see them as illnesses or whatever. But they are ways that your brain works that you need to be aware of. So moving from theory into practical examples. In terms of integration, real examples of integration, we've been using AI in everything we do. We thought that what would happen is that we would be running campaigns and doing things that a marketing agency normally does, but also developing this kind of strategic idea about AI. What happened was, because we were all becoming AI literate, it became integrated into everything. So even as something as simple as the workshops that we do started off in a traditional way that you run a consultancy workshop. You do your discovery, you do your plan, you go to the workshop, everybody writes things on post-its and whiteboards, you take photos of them, you go back to the office, you spend 2 days writing them up, you write a report, you send it back, you discuss the report. That whole process changed as we did more and more of these workshops with AI, because suddenly we were able to take photos and convert them into notes, for instance. But also we started asking people, when they had an idea about how they might use AI, to put it into a web form instead on their phone and just go, I think I could save time by doing this. And that would automatically take it through to a database, and that database would automatically write a small use case and using ChatGPT, write a use case and write some next steps and some suggested priority scoring for it. So at the end of the workshop, instead of having lots of post-it notes, we were able to now go back to clients with a database of possible AI bots that they can build, possible processes they can improve. So it's amazing. And then through those conversations, we started to realize that we need to record the conversations, because those conversations you have in meetings then can be converted into text, and not just to do meeting notes, but those conversations you have in meetings, sometimes the best ideas happen there, and you can convert those into product descriptions or into proposals or, problem statements. Just everything it started to integrate into. One big breakthrough for us, very exciting, we've got a product just coming to market now, which is we run Content Hub, so content marketing for one client, and we were able to take real data about their customers and social media data and gather that and turn it into kind of mini chatbots based around that data and give them personalities and allow them to talk. Thought that might be interesting as a way of kind of bringing personas to life, but of course it also meant that we could get them to talk to each other like in informal conversations, and that was really strange, but also really, really useful. And then we were able to use them to test content and react to content. Now, these are not real people, so this is strange, but think of it less as not real and more like a simulation of a campaign that's reaching those people. And we're able to get test results from them, which we actually found were really, really highly predictive of what good results would be as well. So absolutely amazing. And then, of course, AI for content repurposing is worth mentioning as well. There is, I don't know if anyone has seen Notebook LM. It's Google's latest product. It's all over the place at the moment on social media, but everybody's social media is different, so I'll just mention it. But you can put any number of PDFs and notes into it and turn that into a podcast, a conversational podcast where two presenters talk to each other. We'll send around an example of that later on. But it's incredible. It's really uncanny. It's like a really interesting conversation using metaphor and bouncing ideas back and forth and a different way to take in the information. But that's just one example of how you can take content from one place and turn it into something else in moments. Reports start to look a bit dumb in that scenario. So when you create a PDF report or a big report, you're kind of creating it for an imagined every person audience. But it's really, once you've worked out the processes, no trouble at all to adapt that report for each of those different individual audience types, or to turn it into an audio, or to turn it into visualizations. In terms of content, one of our favorite demonstrations we did recently was just simply going to a YouTube video where every YouTube video has a transcript, copying it all, and then taking that transcript, refining it through ChatGPT, and then generating a really high quality articles from that. If you ask ChatGPT to generate articles about your company, it's not going to be great, but if you give it great content that's your content, it can do all sorts of things in terms of repurposing it. So things evolve really fast. These are some examples I've just covered, but we'll send these slides out afterwards. Let's move ahead. So how do you do it? Really, it's about getting people onboarded properly into AI literacy, and then to keep them moving. And how you keep them moving is motivation and processes, and that motivation is just very often what we call AI vertigo. It's moments of just absolute amazement and breakthrough that keep people pushing on. Something like that PDF, turning that into a podcast, is one of those AI vertigo moments for a lot of people that just make you go, oh wow, actually there's so much we can do with this. So it's introducing people, it's finding ways for them to experiment safely, responsibly, giving them the support to do that, and then finding breakthrough projects where you can do something really big. And I don't want to overstate this, but it's hard not to. Those breakthrough projects can be completely game-changing for companies in terms of how they're doing their business. You find the most difficult problem and you start to be able to build either new processes or even new software prototypes to deal with them. And again, this is non-technical people. Once you get to the stage where it needs to be enterprise level ready, you can start talking to software developers. But you're miles ahead of where you would have been in the olden days of last year, when you had to send them a brief and kind of start mocking up things. I've covered this, so I'm just going to move on. These are the three phases of innovation. First of all, onboarding, leaders and teams. I can't overstress the importance of getting leaders on board, and then often working with strategic and planning. So you get your onboarding phase, you then work with people. We do something called a power hour, often to unblock people or get them moving again by working through a difficult task with them and showing them how fast they can do it just with simple AI tools that they've got access to. Once everybody's running with those sorts of innovation programs and coming up with those ideas, you need systems to capture them and to manage the governance on that innovation. And pretty soon it becomes something that boards need to talk about. And we do kind of fractional chief AI officer work, and boards are beginning to look at hiring chief AI officers as well, not just for the technical sides, but for the cultural and organizational dimensions of things. In terms of stages of AI literacy development, this is the Dunning-Kruger effect laid flat, which is, when you start learning, we see people become very, very overconfident and then can often become very disillusioned. And this is often the stage that we're talking to people now, because everybody's had a go on ChatGPT, and then a year later they go, I'm not really going any further with this. I'm not really getting the breakthroughs that I need. It's helpful for email, I suppose, but what else can it do? And there's work to do. It takes work to gain the literacy to go further. There's also a lot of places where people trip up early on because of unrealistic expectations. They kind of think they're talking to an all intelligent, all-knowing entity, and it doesn't know as much as them about their specialist subject. They do kind of generic questions or look at obscure topics that disappoint them, and generally they give up too soon. The point of onboarding with AI literacy is to give people a good 10 hours of working with the model for them to gain a kind of basic literacy. That's a number from Ethan Mollick over at Wharton Business School. He says it takes about 10 hours to get a feel for basic fluency with an AI model, which I would agree with, and we'd all agree with them on our experience. So we started doing these AI power hours. We used to do them as part of programs, and we've started breaking them out and just doing them as one-off interventions now for people. But basically, it's incredibly powerful. Is you get somebody who's really experienced in working with AI tools. You sit down with somebody on a task that typically is going to take about 4 or 5 hours, say, an afternoon. And it's a fairly simple process, but you break that task down into constituent steps, and you apply AI tools to it, and try not to overpromise at the start, but generally you get the afternoon's work done. And generally people are like, you've given me an afternoon back. You get some lovely feedback. But also using AI, we record those sessions and then give them back a report on the tools and methods that they used and things that they could try next. So it's kind of a boost or an intervention. The big thing that we learned all the way through with teaching anyone of any level, but especially leaders, about it is you have to feel it. You have to get hands on. It's a case of show then tell. There's no point just talking about how big this opportunity is or what it's going to do for the organisation. You've got to get in there and help them feel it. So I'm going to run over about 5 minutes as per, because. And then we'll get into Q&A. So please do stick with us if you can. This is the slide that you may want to screenshot, because this is the whole thing. This is what we're working through with people. So you've got these different levels: foundational, intermediate, and advanced of AI literacy. And I'd say most of us at Brilliant Noise now, we're in the high 2 or there's a couple of people who are firmly in the 3, the advanced session. The pre-literate is the stage that we talk about, which is people who are trying out AI but haven't really used paid versions. The paid version of ChatGPT is still, even though they've given away the old impressive model, miles ahead of where the old one is. The features are incredible. What you can do is incredible. But pre-literate, you're kind of querying it. You're treating it like a search engine. It's kind of a playful thing, and you kind of get benefits. There's a lot of novelty. Let's turn the meeting report into a Dolly Parton song. Why not? Using free tools, and you're prompting. You're putting in prompts. At a foundational level, this is where we get people onboarded and start putting structure to that and to learning that literacy. The objective there is really about speeding up tasks. And as we go up the levels, it's kind of tasks, then process, then system we look at. But task, we're going to be taking an attitude of this is practice. This is a practice. We are practicing AI. It tends to be on an individual level. You're using one tool, usually paid for, so you're getting the benefits of being able to do more prompts and more complicated things. And you learn about things called structured prompts, which is how you ask the questions of the AI to get much better results, much dramatically better results. And how to build bots, which, when you're on level 0 sounds incredible, but is super straightforward. And that can speed up your tasks a lot. Then you move to an intermediate level, and this is a conscious effort. You don't naturally segue into this. This is okay. I'm going to try and push myself more. But an intermediate level, that's where we see the companies running innovation programs, and they're beginning to innovate around the whole process of doing something and bringing AI into it. And that's a kind of an innovation practice, and it's a team thing. And you're going to be using a portfolio of tools, probably more than just ChatGPT. If that's where you start, that's usually the one we start people with. You're going to be using things like Claude, you're going to use maybe image models, and you're going to be starting to connect bots so they're talking to each other, which sounds crazy but produces really strong results, especially if you're trying to do creative work or if you're coding as well. And then the advanced level, this is really at the system level. You're looking at the whole organization, and this is where you're going to start inventing things. And there are people beginning at this level. It's amazing. You see people who are extending their skills outside of what they can do. So they're beginning to be able to do data analysis or basic software engineering, which sounds crazy, but it really works. They're discovering edge tools, and they're creating systems. Not everyone, this isn't deterministic. You don't need to go to that level, but you definitely want some people out who get to that level on your team, because you can just do incredible things. And they're beginning to combine tools into systems. So that's the framework. The benefits, benefits are really interesting, right? I had a complex metaphor about occupational lenses on glasses, which I might get into. But what we can see in terms of ROI is we can see the far future ROI on generative AI really easily. It's 15.7 trillion dollars will be added to the global economy. That's the equivalent of 5 UKs by 2030, according to PwC. And we can see the really close stuff. We can see the benefit of productivity gains from that task level stuff. What's hard is the bit in the middle, which is what people usually refer to as the ROI, which is where am I going to get the payoffs. So you get your productivity and innovation gains. You get your strategic advantage, I think, by beginning to innovate faster. And you also have people who are beginning to, this is what we call signs of increasing AI literacy. When we go back into companies after a couple of months after we've started working with them, you tend to find that people are harder to fool. Like, they have a much clearer sense when vendors or they're reading commentators are talking that are overhyping AI. They're much more critical because they've got a basic understanding of how it works and what doesn't work. They're also more curious. They're finding lots of use cases all over the place, and they're kind of developing fluency. They're bringing it into their workflows a lot more. So those are the kind of benefits you see. Hard to put ROI on them sometimes, but we're getting there. And as I say, it kind of splits into that near ROI and that next ROI. The ROI of AI literacy, of being able to use these tools, one of the payoffs is that when a new feature comes out, you can usually apply it straight away because you were already wishing it was there. So as these new powerful models come through and the spending on them has gone from, I think the one that we were using a couple of years ago, ChatGPT 3.5, cost about 4 million to make that, and that was all compute. That was all computer muscle power. The ones that they're working on at the moment are 1.5 billion to 2 billion, and there will be $10 billion dollar models coming soon. Don't even get me started on the statistics around power. Huge amounts of energy are being bought for this as well, which does touch on sustainability issues. But Microsoft has just done a deal to open a reactor on 3 Mile Island. Oracle has planning permission to build 3 nuclear reactors. This is all going into AI. Sorry, couldn't resist dropping that one in there. This is a very large scale. So our point is, AI literacy is the best investment your organization can make right now. Everything is in flux, everything is moving, but if you are getting people to develop skills in using and working with AI, they're going to be more ready for whatever comes next, and they're going to be delivering a lot of benefits now in terms of productivity and quality of work and those sorts of things. You can measure that, but I wouldn't say obsess about that, because the value is going to come from the fact that the world is, I know consultants always say this, but it really is true, it's measurably true at the moment, that the world is changing faster than it ever has, especially in this technology. Thank you for coming. I really hope that has been useful to you. We're going to get the paper out to you next couple of days, I think, maybe even sooner than that. And then everybody else who didn't attend can have a look, but you'll be first. And we'll open up now to some Q&A. So just drop a question in the comments, and we'll run for about 10-15 minutes more. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask my studio assistant, Stephanie, what questions do we have?
I've had a few questions come through on LinkedIn. The first one is, in our senior team, a lot of us are keen to start working with AI, but our CEO is concerned about the risks, concerned with putting it in the hands of everyone, and that's stopping us investing. How can you make the case for AI literacy?
Making the case for AI literacy, well, some of that is in there. We, in some of our previous webinars and in our paper as well, you'll see what we call the mother of all business cases, which is the scale and immediate opportunities that there are for any organisation with AI. Risk, one of the things we also notice, and this is just an observation, but that when there are concerns that are expressed as ROI or risk, very often there's also a strong emotional reaction underneath, because this is a turbulent change. There's a lot going to change. So in making the case, the business case to colleagues about that, to overcome it, it's first of all that there are very straightforward ways to manage that risk by paying for instance, for premium versions of ChatGPT where content isn't shared back to the model, using local models, making clear in policy with people about what content or what data they can share or not share on the systems, and when they're going to be in data. We usually write a quick briefing on that for the security director or CIO on that kind of a thing. But I will also refer to, I heard an FT briefing the other day with Sherry Kutu, the serial entrepreneur and investor, FTSE board member as well. And she was saying the risk is much more of missing out on this one. The risk is much more what happens when your competitors or someone in the US or someone in China has taken your business model and redeveloped it with AI. That's a much bigger risk than any of the things that feel like short-term risks. So, and also I think the other case is that from a risk point of view, the companies that are going to be best placed to understand the risks, not just security risks, but also competitive risks, are ones where they have AI literate people in their organisation. Opening it up to everyone, that sounds like a cultural issue. I've seen organisations that have been brave and given all of their teams ChatGPT licenses to see what happens along with the guidelines and training. But there's no reason not to just start with the leadership team, perhaps a tiger team or an innovation team in the organisation, and see what happens. You don't necessarily have to take a blanket approach straight away. There's lots of ways of managing risk. And the business case is, well, it would have to be specific to your organisation, but it's considerable.
CN asks, when you're working with an organisation, what objections or blockers do you come across at the start, and then how does that evolve?
That's a lovely question. Thanks, CN, and thanks for joining. Remember revolutions we worked on together in the past. So what are the objections that we get early on? It's really interesting. So generally, once we're working with an organisation, it means that there is a senior leader who is backing this, either instinctively and saying literally, I do not understand about this. I know that this is going to change things. You guys need to come in and teach us. But the objections come in lots of different forms, and strangely, that doesn't exclude objections from IT departments, from data experts, for people who have domain expertise in artificial intelligence, because it feels like all of a sudden, like, I've been working on this for years, and now you're just trampling over my stuff. So we often have those objections expressed to us in a break, in an early workshop, and people will come up and say, I just need to let you know, I'm a skeptic on this stuff, and my reaction to that is like, well, fantastic, because you really need to be skeptical. And skeptical's not the same as being a cynic. Cynics are much harder to work with, but skeptics, you want to encourage that critical thinking, and you want to encourage them to ask those questions, not to sit back and go, I don't want to upset the apple cart here, I don't want to rock the boat because we're investing in this course. It's like, no, you ask those questions, you be skeptical, but let's look at what the outcomes are. And almost, no, I say without exception actually, so far, those skeptics have generally become the biggest advocates once we've entered the innovation phase, because they understand they understand data so well, and they understand the technology or whatever so well, and they suddenly see how it can change how they work with everyone in the organisation. That really, data use and digital tool use should be ubiquitous, and it should all be connected, not a department that they want that. But yeah, so skeptics in various forms. I think the other kind of objection that's expressed is anger, and it's usually expressed around something to do with an ethical issue like jobs, or like the impact of power consumption that AI is having, and what that might do to the environment. Again, I think that both of these can be addressed and are valid concerns. And interestingly, working with the public sector, we've worked with a charity and we've worked with a consultancy in government as well. Our main instinct is to make arguments about commercial competitive advantage, but there's also a responsibility, if you like, from a citizen's point of view, or from a from a non-commercial entity's point of view, is you need people to be literate in this, because otherwise we're going to be waiting for large tech companies to come and tell us how AI is going to be used, and to hand us the equivalent of Facebook or what they did to social networks or to search engines, and say, this is how you're going to use it, and this is how much it's going to cost, and the power will reside with them. So ironically, I'm talking about using big tech tools, but I think everybody should be able to think critically about AI, and the only way you can do that is by having experienced working with it.
Leo wonders, what are the sorts of daily tasks that we take people through to show the benefit of time saved by using AI?
Oh, great question. Thank you, Leo. The kinds of tasks, so we talk about drag tasks with people, which are tasks that slow you down and take too much time. And it's literally anything. So when we've done this on a large scale, we've had people from accounts teams who have been creating bots that can see PDFs and take data out of them so they don't have to do data entry. So literally the most annoying and boring thing that they have to do. For other people, it will be about things like writing reports quickly, or being able to interrogate a lot of different types of data, research, whatever's taking a long time, and you wish you could just get to the interesting bit. Those are the sorts of tasks. And it changes as well, depending on the literacy of the individual and the organisation, how they're thinking about that. So, for instance, I like to think about meetings. So, meeting at a task level, you might go, now I can create an agenda. Like, I don't know, everybody's brain's different, but my brain finds agendas really hard to do, or schedules for an away day, because you have to change the times and slot the things around, and it drives me nuts. But so you can get that done really, really quickly, really easily. And also record the meeting and then write the minutes up super fast. I spoke to a client in one organisation who said they knew someone who had 2 days blocked out in their diary to write up the minutes of a board meeting. This is something that can be done in, if they want to be meticulous, an hour. If they want to be slapdash, in 2 minutes. But these are things that should be things of the past. At a process level, though, you might start thinking about AI optimizing the workflow of a meeting. So how should meetings work? Who should be in them? Can we generate the right pre-reads for people? Can we translate the IT director's report into something that the marketing director can understand? All these sorts of things can come up. But yeah, it tends to be anything that's dull. When we did a talk on AI literacy at the Robots Are Coming conference in July, we did a kind of live jazz session almost of people making requests, and one of them was, can you fill in my timesheet? And I was very embarrassed to think, like, oh, well, how on earth would I do that? And then we thought, yes, of course. Take a screenshot of the diary, have that extracted, turn it into a table that's going to cut and paste into the timesheet accurately. That's going to be a start. That's going to get you ahead. So all sorts of things. The main thing is to make it useful to people and to encourage them to explore more and find more uses for it.
Kelly would like to know what specific use cases we have found that's made a significant impact on productivity within an organisation. Perhaps an example when we've done an AI power hour or something like that, a specific example from a client.
Yeah, so a specific example. It's hard to spot these yourself, and it's a good question, because we're just used to doing them. So if you're just used to taking work and reviewing it and giving a view on how it should be improved, for instance, if you're a senior director. So in a couple of power hours, one of them was simply a board report that someone was writing. It was a senior executive. He carved out the afternoon, and we actually didn't expect it to be able to do it. We just wanted to help him prepare to do it well. But it was simply a case of taking all of the different reports from his team, putting them into a bot that was secure and private on his running on his system, and have it analyse them and produce a summary that was in the style of the report that he wrote last time. And that got us to about 90%, I'd say, of the report being finished. He was like, I just need to go and check the numbers now. So that's an example of a use case that's like, do you know what? You don't even realise that that's wasted time. Another example would be just a couple of weeks ago, a client was showing me a pitch process that they were in, and then putting together a proposal based on 3 fairly complex briefs. And I said, well, let's have a crack and see where we can get to. They had a hugely complex presentation that was being prepared, and we simply took the briefs, and had the generative AI run an analysis of what the tasks were. And by the way, this is a great tip for anybody who's using ChatGPT, especially the premium one at the moment. Asked it to output its analysis of where there were gaps in in the response to the briefs as a table of issues and to prioritise those. Just have a guess at prioritising them, and also suggest some solutions or fixes for those. And then immediately there was something that was so much more structured for them to work with than literally reading the brief, reading the presentation, reading another brief, reading the presentation. So it's things like that. Anything where there's more information than we can handle can be turned into a much faster task, or we can think a lot faster, or it can do the thinking that we can't do very effectively, but we somehow force ourselves to do.
Cien has a second question, which is about tools and budget, and then justifying the cost, so the ROI of those tools. She asks, what budget should an organisation set aside for tooling, and how does that scale over time, data processing credits, and how would an organisation measure the cost benefit for the finance team?
Thanks, Ian. I would start by saying, well, where we were a year ago, we were just talking about marketing services, and we mainly work with marketing services at the moment, although we're working with wider organisations now as well. It just naturally happens. And what we said was marketing spend is 10% of revenue for most organisations. That's the average. Goes up to 20% in tech, down to about 8% in CPG. Of that, you should be spending 70% on things that you know are working, 10%, 20% on new things that seem to be working, and about 10% of that on experimental innovation stuff. And last year what we said was that all of that should be spent on artificial intelligence literacy that leads to innovation and experimentation. So the short answer is 1% of 1% of turnover is table stakes, absolute minimum. How you talk about, but I think it should probably be more than that. How you should talk about it in terms of return on investment is such a good question. And how we structure it for finance teams is that we will look at what their return on investment approach is currently, and then map it to map that to how we express the ROI from these generative AI projects. So you can do it by project, you can do it by estimates of time saved by individual, all of those sorts of things. What you generally find, I don't mean to be too harsh on this, but what you generally find is that those measures of ROI, and especially of productivity, which everyone talks about, but very few people measure effectively. If you're manufacturing things, fantastic, you've got productivity outputs. But for the organisation, the marketing organisation or the management organisation in that company, then I'm sorry, what do you produce? How do we measure the productivity on that? It tends to be input, it tends to be hours. So it's a whole fascinating subject in itself, but essentially we map it to that. Since we are generally dealing with literacy and innovation projects at the moment, it's kind of an unanswered question about how that scales over time. But what we do know is that it's human time plus usually ChatGPT and then some coding. That is around £25 to £30 a month per user for that technology alone. It may change, but that's a bargain of the century as far as I'm concerned in learning. It may also be the bargain of the century for ChatGPT because doubtless they are learning too, but that's another issue. I hope that answers your question, Cien. The other answer to that is I would also talk to you, because you are a very good CIO and innovation officer, and I would like to get your advice on that.
We have two more questions. Alia would like to know what has surprised us most, and where we think things are still in progress. So she says, through your experimentation, which areas or tasks have you found that AI has outperformed expectations, and where have you found that it's still a work in progress?
Oh, that's such a good question. Thank you, Alia. I think that everything is both. Everything is still a work in progress. It has exceeded our expectations in almost every area, and then you get used to it very quickly and you forget that it's amazing. That's humans. for you. I think the most shocking, the most surprising, and our friend Dr. Charlotte Ray at Sussex, who's a neuroscientist, says surprise is a superpower. If you're surprised, it turns on the brain's learning centres and you start absorbing information. And it happens to us a lot. But the two most surprising things I would say from this year is building a really highly complex piece of software for analysing marketing data and producing reports from that. Why it was so shocking is not that that AI was able to do that, but that we worked without harming or indeed using any developers at all. And my colleague Dr. Jason Ryan, who is not a coder, developed his skills or developed the ability to do both the data analysis and the software to get it to an MVP really, really quickly. And that's something we're all learning now. So that was shocking to me, surprising and shocking to me that we could move that far that fast. I think the other thing, and just come back to that Notebook LM thing, we'll send a link round to it as well. The thing that produces a podcast, the most surprising thing to me recently is that I listened to an interview with the product manager at Google who built that incredible product. And we listened to how they did it, and we realized that we could build that too. And you could build that too with publicly available tools. It is an incredibly clever product, but the tools to actually make it are all there already. That's the surprising thing, is that the more you have very, very literate colleagues in your team who can go and stretch the boundaries of what's possible, the better it is. Work in progress, I think, is work in progress is actually the products from the big tech companies. So bizarrely, Gemini, Microsoft, these big tech companies have these incredible AIs at their disposal, and if you use them direct, like Copilot or ChatGPT or Gemini, they're kind of amazing and you can do brilliant things with them. But when they put them into existing software like Docs or Slides or Excel or Word, it just doesn't seem to work very well. And in fact, it's very disappointing for a lot of people. So that's still a work in progress, is what the products look like. And it does make me think that maybe the products are going to be the products that we create for ourselves. But that's a subject for another podcast, another webinar.
I think we maybe have time for one more question.
Okay.
So the final one is from Chris, and he just wonders what our thoughts are on copyright issues around AI-generated content. So
the thoughts are that the best way to avoid copyright issues is to be using your own content. So I think when people are generating images, things like that, you're going to have a discussion based on your ethics and your values as an organisation about how you're going to deal with that. From a legal point of view, that's different. Different companies will indemnify you. Microsoft, I think Adobe will also indemnify you for copyright violations. That doesn't then solve the ethical issue, because basically what they're doing is, if someone sues you because your work looks suspiciously like theirs, then don't worry, because they'll take them to court. So that's just like hiding behind big tech, I suppose. So you can not worry about it in that way. But especially with writing and any other kind of content, if you're putting in enough of your own original thinking or your own synthesized thinking, you're going to create something original, and that's not going to be an issue. There will be issues arising, but again, it's not a showstopper. I think for lazy marketers, with like the kind of people who are doing high volume blog posts and just trying to get as much content out there to beat SEO algorithms, then there's lots of issues, but I refuse to advise them. That's it. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for all the questions, and for those of you who stayed for the whole hour. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Any questions at all, please do contact us, hello@Brilliant Noise, or connect with me on LinkedIn and send me any queries. This has been an absolute pleasure to pull together the thinking, and I hope you enjoy the paper. Bye.